Right. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. Less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. This is a direct quote from a man who is one of the most influential people in the world right now, Steve Jobs. If you'll give me a minute, I can tell you a little bit more about Steve Jobs because there's a lot more to this man than just Apple computers. He started out in San Francisco, California, where he was born and adopted by his two parents. After high school, he attended Reed College, but then dropped out after one semester. He still sat in for other classes, even though he wasn't an actual student there. His first real job in the real world was a job with the company Atari, Pong. And it was while he was at Atari that he pulled some strings and got an entire trip to India paid for. He used this trip to India for spiritual enlightenment. Steve Jobs is a Buddhist. After the entire India thing, one of his good friends that he met through electronics, Steve Wozniak, it was those two that began and laid down the foundation for Apple computers. When they created Apple computers, they were still up and coming, but they ended up creating the Macintosh computer in the 70s. When they were starting to become a bigger company, they pulled in the current, at the time, president of the Pepsi company. His name was John Sculley, and Steve Jobs asked him, do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life, or do you want to change the world? It ended up backfiring on him because as soon as John Sculley came in, entered a turbulent time, and Jobs was eventually relieved of his duties by John Sculley. Jobs was quoted to be a erratic, very harsh boss, and so that's when Sculley relieved Jobs from Apple. After Apple, he went to a new computer company called the Next Computer Company, where they created big, technologically advanced computers, but it was aimed at a very small market, so the actual computers only sold about 50,000 total. So it was after they only sold 50,000 computers that they switched over and became a straight software company. Also, while he was at Next, he bought a group from Lucasfilms called the Graphics Group. The Graphics Group was a computer effects company that Lucasfilm had organized, and once it was bought from Steve Jobs, it ended up becoming what everyone knows as Pixar. Pixar originally started out as they created computers, but one of the people at Pixar wanted to create animated films, and so it just took off from there. They created the first computer-animated film, Toy Story, which everyone has pretty much seen. And that's where the combination of Pixar and Disney started to take off. Pixar ended up being bought by Disney, leaving Steve Jobs as the largest stock share, or the single largest stock shareholder in Disney currently, with 1.7% of the stocks. That's bigger than Roy E. Disney, who was Bloodline. Around the 90s, the Next Computer System company was bought by Apple, bringing Steve Jobs back to Apple. It was there where Steve Jobs started getting more into the electronic handheld divisions, things like the iPad, the iPod, the iPhone. It wasn't until Jobs was fired from Apple the first time, got his act together, and got with Pixar that things such as the iPod and things could, I'm losing myself, and these things could be created. He's still influenced by his former jobs. The Next Computer Company is still a big influence because Mac OS X is a software that is owned by Apple now, but it stemmed from a software that the Next Computer Company had created. There's still big things going on for Apple. They're coming out with or looking to update the iPad, and they're still always advancing everything that they currently own, such as iTunes, always updating that. iPhone 4 just came out not too long ago, so he's still updating all his products. Just as a recap, this man has created one of the biggest computer companies in the world, has fallen from one of the biggest computer companies in the world, but then created the computer animation company, and is the single largest stock shareholder with the Walt Disney Company. This man is one of the most influential people in the world, and he'll be remembered as one of the most technologically savvy people of all time. Thank you.